Welcome back to Spencer FYI, and we're here with someone who's going to talk a little bit about self-care and what its importance is. So Jamie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do.
Sure. My name is Jamie Neff, and I serve as a Health and Human Sciences Educator with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. Bit of a mouthful, but basically we serve Iowans with programming that supports birth to aging. So really our broad scope of programming applies to all folks that live here in the state. And today specifically, thank you for the invitation to talk about self-care because it can be hard to start that conversation, but sometimes having these more structured conversations, structured programs out there just helps more folks learn about different strategies and ways to support themselves so that they can better serve others and support their community and loved ones.
How did you get involved with Extension, and where are you out of Spencer office? Or
Sure, great question. So I started my role with Extension and Outreach at the Palo Alto County office as a county program coordinator, and just like a year and a half ago took a specialist position with kind of the broad campus Extension and Outreach. So I serve as a field specialist over 13 counties in north central Iowa. So some drive time, but really a really neat way to bring programming to all sorts of audiences and ages. So that's what keeps the job, different day to day, which is a lot of fun. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I know that our focus today is self-care. So maybe explain a little bit about what you mean by self-care and why that's important.
Awesome. Absolutely. So self-care are things that we do to kind of fill our own cup, right? Ways that serve as protective layers for us as we're, kind of thinking through this crisis mode that Spencer has been in, our county, and other counties impacted by natural disasters. The need for self-care, again, these activities, different strategies we can touch on, help our bodies, our systems, our brains be able to recover and repair and thrive so that we can, again, serve our communities, serve our loved ones, our neighbors. And so some of those strategies that we talked about at our program, that's all about self-care, right? So there's kind of 6 different main strategies, right? So we're talking physical activity, walking, running, biking, all of that, right? Maybe that's nothing new. But the importance there with physical activity is to find something that you enjoy. So for me, my go-to is not picking up a basketball, not going to a basketball game, but for others that might be great for them. And understanding that physical activity can come in throughout our day, right? The goal of 150 minutes doesn't happen 2.5 hours at a time, right? So breaking that up into manageable chunks. Can you take a 5-minute break every hour, as we're seated at workstations, working on a laptop? Can we take a minute to stretch? Find a few minutes to walk around the block or to engage in some physical activity throughout the day, because all of those minutes add up, which is great. So we talk about physical activity, we talk about getting a good night's sleep. So that 7 to 9 hours can feel so far away for some folks depending on, age and life cycle and stage. The ages of your kiddos at home definitely has an impact. But understanding there's ways that we can protect our sleep, right? By using our bedroom, calm, quiet, comfortable, being able to turn off our electronic devices an hour before bed, right? If we have these bright screens on, that's telling our body, our brain to be like, we're awake, we're ready, right? But instead, building habits that support high quality sleep. So physical activity, getting a good night's sleep. We talk about social connectedness and how important that is. A few examples that came up, as folks are reflecting on the last year, understanding that maybe we've met neighbors we've never known before or connected with family members that we've been apart from for a while. Understanding that these social circles, they change and evolve, right, with our families, ages, stages, all of that. But how important that is to, again, reducing stress, reducing anxiety, being able to share that in a social network. Another piece that we talk about is finding a purpose or volunteering. And so we've seen, I'm sure, a lot of that here in this community. People, it feels like, coming out of the woodwork to support each other and recognizing that through a crisis, our values may have shifted, right? We might find something is really important to us now than what it looked like before the crisis. So another component of self-care is keeping a positive attitude. And when we think about positive attitudes, things like, are we assuming positive intent, assuming good intent from those maybe that we're working with or loved ones in our, again, in our social circles, being able to see the good in the long term, right? We know right now it might feel really different and really hard, but having that long-term scope to be able to maintain that positive outlook. Which brings us to our final strategy for self-care that we touch on, and those are different relaxation techniques. There are things like deep breathing exercises or guided imagery, meditation, yoga, tai chi, repetitive prayer, the list goes on for those. And so we encourage folks to find something, again, that's meaningful to them. Give it a try a few times before saying, like, this isn't for me. Because all of these self-care strategies, you said, why is it important, right? Our long-term health outcomes are directly impacted by our ability to take self-care into our day, into our habits. These self-care activities, they're doing things like lowering blood pressure, helping reduce the level of stress hormones in our body. And these long-term impacts and the buildup of not taking care of this now in our busy day-to-day, we understand that can be absolutely challenging, right? But the great thing about self-care strategies is they work together. If you are out at a basketball game or out at a volleyball game at the local school, going to a band concert, right? You're establishing social connectedness, another strategy, right, that we touched on. Maybe you go out to dinner and you share a healthy meal as a group, right? So these things, they can ladder together. If you like gardening, that is physical activity. You're pushing, pulling, maybe giving back by donating produce from your garden, right? So these self-care strategies can be laddered and they work together, again, to improve our long-term outcomes, reduce anxiety, depression, levels of suicide risk. Another component, especially when related to crisis response, is bringing an understanding or at least level of awareness to things like burnout and compassion fatigue. So if we are helping others in a way that is eventually putting that experience back on ourselves, our body starts to treat these experiences, these shared, collective memory almost, right, as trauma for ourselves. So we want to be sure to take care of our body and be able to check in, right? Those relaxation techniques, that breathing exercise, you might notice you're carrying a lot of tension in your shoulders, or that you are, more prone to headaches, or your temper is changed, right? Our moods are impacted by long-term fatigue, by stress. So again, all 6 of these strategies help our bodies, our brains, be able to recover, protect ourselves, right? Putting on the oxygen mask for ourselves before we help others. It's the same concept. So I like to phrase self-care strategies as they're simple, but not always easy. So finding ways, a support network, if you want to build social connectedness, and maybe you're new in a community, finding ways to participate in activities that are on the calendar, at group events, a class at the rec center. You might be learning a new physical activity while meeting others. So again, just wanting to share that these can be coupled and laddered to support us as human beings and to support our care for others.
I suppose the big thing too is just find what works for you, right?
100%. That was a perfect summary. Find what you enjoy and what motivates you and drives you. We have permission to be interesting and to contribute and to be loved and cared for. And by us practicing that self-care, that helps us so much in the long run.
I know that a lot of things are, you talked about they're kind of personal to you, but are there some resources out there if folks need some kind of guidance to get to this point?
Absolutely. So one resource that comes to mind with extension and outreach, we have a website that's called Spend Smart, Eat Smart. And so you might think, ooh, eat smart, that's only about food. But actually, there's resources all around physical activity. So they have, one of my favorite pieces is a little workout calendar. So it's a PDF that you can just click on the first day of 30 days. So it doesn't have to match up, perfectly to the calendar. But, where it determines that physical activity for you, if that's comfortable for your body and your permissions with your care providers, of course, your primary care. But if you want to learn strength training exercises or a little bit of cardio, some of those shorter stretching exercises while seated, those can make a really big impact as we go day to day, often in a very similar position as we carry ourselves throughout the day. So finding ways to find like breaks to build that in. So Spend Smart, Eat Smart, I just like to plug that. And then a statewide resource through Extension and Outreach is called Iowa Concern, and that is a phone number that folks can either text or call, and they can have support related to emotional support, legal issues, as well as financial concerns. So that can be a really great starting point. If someone, it's 3 a.m. and you can't sleep, again, we want to promote good sleep. So, being able to write that down in a text and send it off, helps you take it off your own plate and then have a connection with someone who's able to then continue making the connections to get the support that you need.
Sounds good. So
Yeah.
lots of ways that you can take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Just go out there and kind of maybe hunt some up and
Exactly.
see what you can do.
Yeah, and there's so many resources out there. I mean, the internet is vast. So again, like you said, finding what works for you. And then the last resource I wanted to plug is the 988 resource line, emergency crisis line. And that is also a phone number that can be texted or phone called.
Okay, sounds good. So there's lots of ways out there that you can help take care of yourself.
Yes, yep.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a crisis situation, just any kind of
Absolutely,
on a
right?
regular
It's
day.
it's raising our own threshold for that capacity to handle stress and to check in with our body and ready us for the next day, right?
All right, awesome, sounds good. Well, thanks for coming in.
Yes, thank
Anything
you again.
else do you want to mention that I didn't ask about?
No, just that Health and Human Sciences with Extension and Outreach has a broad range of programming available, so we invite folks to check us out online at our website, and thank you for the time.
You're welcome. Well, I appreciate you taking time to come in and give us some of those tips and tricks
Absolutely.
to help us take care of ourselves.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. We'll be back with more right after this.